Hey guys, I hope you're all doing great. Welcome to What's Good Kimberly. And today we are jump starting my Oscars discussions. I think the Oscars this year are going to be very, very interesting. There's a lot of really interesting films that provoked a lot of thought. So I just want to get right into it. I'm jumping off this Oscars live real talk discussion series with Bugonia. Bugonia has four nominations at this year's Oscars. We're coming in with a nomination for Best Picture, Best Actress in a Leading Role, Emma Stone, Best Adapted Screenplay by Will Tracy, and Best Original Score by Jerskin Frederick. I have grown to have a not a love hate, but more of a love question mark relationship with Yorgos Lanthimos. I love his films, but I'm always like, that was interesting. My first exposure to him was The Killing of a Sacred Deer, which it just touched me deeply. I felt so many strong emotions with Killing of a Sacred Deer. It was disturbing, but very conversational. It was disturbing slash really made you think about a lot of stuff and a lot of different types of people in the world. And I think that's something Yorgos Lanthimos is very good at, is making us really, really question things that we kind of just allow every day, even things that can be thought of disturbing. And I feel like he begs for us to pause and dissect before we just accept something. Um, and Begonia is absolutely no exception. So I want to start off by saying I do really appreciate his very unique input in where Yorgos Lanthimos brings his audience to. And of course, like all great directors, you have your crushes, so to speak. Maybe not so much crushes, but those people that your people. Let's call it vibey folks. You get this with Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio. You get this with Wes Anderson and the Wilson brothers and Spike Lee um, and Denzel Washington. I'm gonna slap these on for a second. You have these really beautiful pairings in Hollywood, right? And I believe that Yorgos Lanthimos has a really brilliant relationship with Emma Stone. I think it really works in a lot of beautiful ways. So let's get into it. So something that really struck me about Begonia, number one, was that this is actually a remake of a 2003 Korean film. I believe it's called Save the Green Earth, I want to say. Um, and it has the same idea, but I do think that I want to say Will Tracy really deserves Best Adapted Screenplay because from what I have researched, I have not seen the original 2003 version. But the little things that I've seen is that this version of Begonia is different enough. It's enough of an adaptation to really allow Yorgos Lanthimos to put his own stamp and for Will Tracy to really take an idea that's already been developed and from what I have researched and what I hear brilliantly and kind of put a different spin on it because it definitely has a strong social commentary with Begonia, but that's really specific to different cultures, right? Yorgos Lanthimos is Greek, and I imagine in his culture, the way his government operates, the way his society operates over there, is a lot different than South Korea, and which is a lot different than the U.S. And so I do have an appreciation for adaptations in that respect. Something that really, really struck me right off the bat with Begonia was the music, and I think that is the first thing that should strike us with any picture is the feeling, the underlying tone of a film really does come through the score. Um, you guys may or may not know, I'm a huge fan of scenes in films where there are no music. I know we get this with one thing after another with the bank robbery scene. There's no score behind it, and I really, really like moments like that where I don't even notice it yet. And I'm like, wait a minute, there's no music. And the intensity of the moment just speaks for itself. But I do have such a deep appreciation for an original score. And something I thought was really cool, Jerskin Frederick, who's nominated for Best Original Score here, he was not given the film to see beforehand. He was only given 4 words, which were bees, basement, spaceship, and Emily Bald. And as you know, Emily Stone, her character Michelle in this, they definitely shave her head bald so that she can no longer communicate with the mothership. And we'll get into details of that story. But in terms of just starting the film off with the emotional tone, which is the score, I thought the score was perfect. It was emotional and monumental at the same time. And given these 4 keywords, bees, basement, spaceship, and Emily, bald. As a composer, you're just imagining him like at his piano going, okay, bees. All right. Dun, 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 dun. All right, basement. Ooh, okay, let's go a little lower. Dun, 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 dun. Spaceship. Ooh, let's add some chimes in there. Let's add, let's make it seem like you got some, little green men. You can just imagine them. And then Emily Bald, and that's like, okay, where do I go with that as a composer, right? Um, so I thought that was very, very interesting. But what he came up with was a score that made these common moments feel monumental. And it's not till the end of the film where we realize why everything that happened in this film was so monumental and so meaningful. This is a spoiler discussion, spoiler filled discussion. So I am going to talk about the end of the film. I am going to talk about some really clear things that happened in the film. So we're going to spoil it a bit. Um, but one of the things that I really have to say is I just appreciate so much that this was able to happen without him seeing the film first. So I want to touch on just getting into the initial plot. So one of my new favorite actors of this generation, Jesse Plemons, like he's been that scene stealer for so long. He's been that guy in a film where you see him for a little bit and you're like, that one scene had this guy and he was like deep and brilliant and intense. And he's just been that guy for so long. I know for me, I was kind of first introduced to him with Game Night. I love his portrayal of that cop that was like, so serious and so tough, but was also like, can I play games with you guys? Like, can you deal me in? And of course, that was a comedy, and he's done so much great work outside of that and besides it. But that was my first introduction was Game Night. But something powerful he did is he was only on the screen for a few minutes in Civil War, and it was so impactful, and he really rounded out the whole story of exactly what's happening. So I love that this film it's just it's all Jesse Plemons, Teddy, if you will, is his character in the film. It's really centered around him and how his trauma in his life has, and to me, his lack of community really affects how he approaches a situation where his mother is sick from she was addicted to opioids, but she also entered a medical trial from the company that Emma Stone's character Michelle is the CEO of, and things did not go well, and she ended up in a coma. And through that process, he loses his mother, who he's already been in a struggle with because of her addiction. But watching her become so ill, and now just being in a vegetative state in a coma in a hospital, in a small hospital, and we find through the film that this pharmaceutical company has given this lackluster apology to him when his whole world came crashing down. And as well in the plot, we see another character named Dawn. And Dawn is so beautifully played by Aidan Delbis, who he himself is autistic. And I thought he just brought this deep, beautiful, heart wrenching performance where you just love Dawn. And you just kind of want to scream at Dawn, like, I know this is your cousin, but you got to get away from this guy. He's crazy. But one of the things it really brought up for me is how everybody needs community and how important it is to kind of really reach out to people we see that are kind of loners. I think in society there's this idea that like, oh, loners are scary and they're threatening and we should be afraid of them. And it's actually, for me at least, it's like, no, we should all take each other's hand. We should all grab hands, and you never know what you're grabbing someone out of when you engage in community with them. And as I watch Dawn and Terry just go down this dangerous rabbit hole of just an echo chamber of conspiracy theories, which, as we see later on, have more truth than not. Um, they go down this dangerous, dangerous hole, and you realize that they don't have anyone to say, "Hey, I understand you're hurting, and I understand you've got some interesting ideas, but you know, maybe let's not do that. That sounds pretty dangerous." Or, "Hey, Don, your cousin's interesting and, let's get him some help, but you need some help too. Maybe let's not spend so much time with him." Because although Teddy cares and he does care for Don, he also convinces Don to chemically castrate himself so that he's not distracted by sexual thoughts and unable to carry out their mission. And so this I don't know, the film really spoke to me in that way of how much we need community. Um, I love the way the film opens with Emma Stone's character and just how she's that cutthroat female CEO, no BS. She wakes up early. She's the kind of person that does, I don't think she did it in this film, but I wouldn't be surprised if she did a cold plunge and then she runs 5 miles on a treadmill and then she has her trainer come over and they're boxing and they're fighting, and she does so much personal investment into herself and then starts her day. She's just like that alpha female. So, as you know, of course, she's kidnapped by these guys who have on this Jennifer Aniston mask. Um, we see that she's not only just a headstrong CEO, but there's a little bit more to her strength, to her mental strength. And there's a really powerful scene where Teddy and Michelle are, she's chained up at the dinner table, and he has this experience where he shocks her electrically. She has electric shock. I won't say therapy, but electric shock, because he's trying to get to the bottom of like, you're an alien. Contact your mothership and tell them to leave Earth alone. You're making us sick, and I know you want to kill us all. Um, After he tries to shock her and shock the truth or admission out of her, we then find ourselves at this point where he realizes, like, whoa, like you made the power go out. Like, you're not just an alien, you're the Empress. And so he's changed his position. And this conversation at the table, the director really introduces us to a shift in the power dynamic between Michelle and Teddy. Don is kind of always in the same power dynamic. Every now and then he will speak up and go, "Hey, that's loud. That sounds painful. Don't do that. Hey, please don't do that to her." And he's shut down at every turn where he tries to speak up for himself. But we see this shift at the dinner table scene. And one of the most alarming things, and comment if this happened to you guys too, but when he's Teddy's having this conversation with Michelle and the shift in power happens to where she's no longer just his hostage. He's like, "Whoa, I need to clean myself up. I need to straighten myself up. This is the Empress. Now I'm negotiating with the boss. I don't need to convince her to go to her mothership. She is the direct connection." And it's kind of here where we're up until this point, and you guys can let me know in the comments, like, up until this point in the discussion, I really felt like she's still just a hostage of his. But I'm starting to shift my energy based on how she's talking to him. And yes, she's doing that thing where, as a hostage, she's like, "You know what? Okay, let me think about this very clearly. Let me get on his good side. He's trying to negotiate with me based on something that I think is crazy. He thinks I'm an alien, but let me try to reason with him and negotiate with him." I get that she was trying to do that, but then the way she started to really tower over him in the conversation, and really, if they were face to face, she would have been looking down upon him. I don't know if you guys picked up on that. I'd love to know in the comments. But I thought that was such a great moment in terms of the script, in terms of her questioning him back and reaching that point where he's kind of like, you know what? I thought we were having a good conversation. And she gives it right back to him and is like, yeah, I thought we were too. Guess we're not anyway. And it's like, whoa. And she really challenges him, especially when it comes to his mother. And she remembers, wait a minute. Oh, shoot. This is the guy from the trial. Oh, yeah, his mom's in a coma. Shoot. Okay, I got to address this. But she pushes his limits. And I was so startled when Teddy jumps on the top of the table and crawls towards her and is like, you're going to challenge me, kind of thing. I thought that was a really powerful moment, because I think one of the underlying tones of this film is big corporations and how the little people are the ones that get screwed over. We see this with Teddy's coworker, um, and Teddy is a great example of how not just society, but like if we look at the individuals that are getting screwed over by these large companies, and they have loved ones that are ending up in a coma, or they have ended up with, losing their sight, losing a limb, not getting the right medication, and something detrimental happens to that affects the entire family at this point. These are the little people, these are the stories. It kind of reminds me of Aaron Brockovich and how, that film was another wonderful example of corporate greed, if you will, and Erin Brockovich, she knows the names and numbers of all the individual stories because she's like, you can't just look at them as the little person. They have names, they have medical charts, and I know everything that's happening. I feel like this film really is an examination of like, let's look at one of the little people and see just how impactful this big company has affected their life. There's a lot of other themes in this film, like truth tellers, mental illness, um, the need for community, and the environment as a whole. Um, as there's this underlying story with the bees and how he's saying that, the bees are gone because of CCD, and how I think a lot of us have heard the discussion or the argument be made that if bees go away, we as humanity go away. And I do believe that. If you look at the science and you look at just how the world works at a molecular level, you're like, yeah, this is true. Like, it sounds silly, but we need to keep the bees alive. We need to stop doing things to our environment that's threatening the foundation of our environment from like a basic molecular level. But I think in terms of the theme of environment and truth tellers, something that really hit me is as Michelle is arguing with him, and as Michelle is getting really bold in what she's saying in her arguments to Teddy, and kind of calling out the truth on his end of like, look, you're a product of YouTube conspiracy theorists and echo chambers. You have nobody else coming in with other ideas. You think I'm an alien. She's trying to really gaslight him once we realize the end, which we'll talk about. But we see like Teddy is a truth teller. And I think we're seeing this in our society right now in real time. So many of the people that we said, get out of your mom's basement, get off of YouTube, stop listening to creepy podcasts, go touch grass. You're crazy. You're trying to say that people are being trafficked. Okay. You're trying to say that they're eating humans. Okay. You're trying to say that this pharmacy is out to get just you. This big company is out to just get you, right? Okay, sure. And as we see with Teddy, it's like there's so much more truth. And because Teddy's character, because Jesse Plemons, his character Teddy, is so extreme. I mean, you go in his house and he's got foil on the windows, and you see he's got a back room where he's doing other stuff, and we'll talk about that. But you realize, yes, he's an extremist, but there's actual truth to his pain. And just because he's doing some crazy things doesn't mean there's no truth to it. And I think that's a wake up call for all of us in society as we're watching things unfold, as we're watching things happen in the news that used to be conspiracy theories. And we're actually at the point where we're like, dang, I owe some apologies to some people that I told them to go get back in your mom's basement and, finish your crazy board with all your conspiracy theories. It's like, wow, a lot of stuff is actually very true. And which kind of leads me to kind of wrap up a little bit of when we get to the end and we realize she was an alien the whole time. He was right. Not just in theory was he right, but when we see the renderings of the spaceship that he's drawn himself, that he did on his computer, and then we go to Michelle's spaceship and we realize, oh my God, he wasn't that far off in terms of his design. Oh my gosh, this actually is very real and very possible. Um, it speaks a lot to the truth tellers that we like to call crazy because it's convenient, because they don't look the same as we do. They don't, they make their own kombucha, so to speak. They don't go to the doctor. They prefer essential oils. So we want to write them off as crazy. And it's like at the end, it's like, hey, be careful who you call crazy, because we're actually all a little bit odd. But at the end of the day, the truth tellers, sometimes it's like they have to go 110% at everything. And they got to get a little weird to get their point across because nobody believes them. Now, let me bring that back to talk a little bit about the reveals. One, Don, who I just fell in love with his character and I just wanted to rescue him. I just wanted to hug him and say, dude, I know you love your cousin, but you gotta start spending time with other people. I think his ideas, he might be onto something, but the way he's going about it is very dangerous and it can really hurt you. I just wanted to save Don. And I was brokenhearted. I don't, well, I'll watch stuff that's like bloody and I think there's a time and a place for everything, but like my heart broke when he shot himself. When he unalived himself, sorry. My heart broke because I kind of was thinking about all the people in society that maybe don't have the strongest voice for themselves, can't really advocate for themselves. They kind of have to go along because they need to be taken care of. And there may be only one kind of odd relative that's taking care of them. And it made me think that, had this gone in a different direction and Teddy got found out and a SWAT team came in, Don would be right there, face in the grass, hands behind his back and handcuffs, when in actuality, he didn't have all the mental stability or mental connectivity himself to say, whoa, you've gone overboard. I need to go somewhere else. He had so much dependence on Teddy. And I thought the director did a really good job of making us fall in love with Don and then really breaking our hearts to drive home the point. Which leads to the end of the film where Michelle is really, really kind of being exposed as like, wait a minute, oh my gosh, is she? No, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, she's an alien. He was right. I was totally shocked. I was, of course, it was disgusting, but when he blew, unalived himself in the closet and things, you know what I'm talking about. I don't want to, get my video taken down, but parts of him went a rolling, so to speak, and actually hit her in the head. Um, Although that was just like really disgusting and like, whoa, that was graphic. I thought it was almost an appropriate way to tell the story. I kind of don't blame the director for doing that, only because we needed to be shocked, because it is shocking what happens to people sometimes when we tell them they're so crazy that there's no truth to anything that they're saying. When we are gaslighting and not believing and not giving voice to people who don't have community and who do need to touch grass, instead of just calling them crazy, maybe trying to have more compassion as we try to help one another and make sure that we don't end up isolated. At the end of the day, Teddy was disturbed. He was disturbed. I mean, like Michelle saw in the basement, she wasn't his first hostage. She wasn't his first experiment. He had heads in jars. He had hands in formaldehyde. He had pictures of mutilations. And in his mind, it wasn't red rum. It wasn't murder. In his mind, it was just an experiment. But how scary is that? You know what I'm saying? It's the it's the idea that although someone may have so much truth to their fight, like him losing his mom the way he did was so real, but also she was in that coma, but he also listened to a woman he believed to be an alien tell him to put antifreeze in her IV. He was so far gone, and to me, the director is showing us how we throw away people that we don't agree with. We throw them away and we cast them off and we cast them out. They end up with no community. They end up isolated by themselves. We have this sometimes idea of like, yeah, that's where you belong in the outskirts. But then they do something nuts and we're like, oh, how could this happen? I think when there's a lack of community and love and understanding and mental health services, that's the scary thing about this film is that like there was so much mental health needed across the board. Um, just to wrap up, I thought the film was disturbing in a lot of areas, but in a way that should make us think. Um, I don't like graphic violence and like yucky, like, ugh, that's a lot of blood. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I can see beyond it to see the greater picture. Getting back to all the nominations, I think it is highway robbery that Jesse Plemons is not nominated for Best Actor. I think it's actually pretty nuts that he's not nominated. He played Disturbed so well, all the way down to the stare that someone may have in their eyes, the way they don't make eye contact, the way they blink, the way he would fidget and be frustrated, but for the most part be totally calm and have these really out there unbalanced comments and thoughts and beliefs. But it took a lot to push him to a state of just rage and anger. He wasn't walking around with rage and anger like this. It was more of a quiet rage, a more of a like, you've pushed me, and now I'm gonna do this, now I'm gonna do that. And the way Jesse Plemons had, man, he acted the hell out of this role. The way he just had this like glossed over look in his eye when she was like, "Yes, the cure is in a bottle of antifreeze in my car." And he just like had this, the acting was so good, this look of like, "Uh-huh, yeah, okay. I'll go put antifreeze in my mom's IV. That makes sense." He didn't, it wasn't just his delivery of the dialogue, which was very well written. It was the way his whole body embodied someone that was just pushed to the point of mentally just not being there anymore. I think it's super crazy that he's not nominated. I really do think it's crazy. Emma Stone definitely deserves a nomination. I know, she was that adorable girl for so long. Some of my favorites: Easy A, Crazy Stupid Love, La La Land. But she's one of those actors that really started out with comedy, and like I think so many of the greats you think of, like one of my favorite films, Robin Williams in Awakenings with Robert De Niro. That was the first time as a young person I had seen Robin Williams, who I'm like, oh, this guy always makes me laugh, and Nanu Nanu, and Awakenings where he played a doctor and he was so serious. And of course, through the '90s, we saw Robin Williams bring some amazing dramatic work. I think Emma Stone is on that path. I mean, she started her career by making us laugh and go, "Oh, she's adorable. She's kind of dorky. She's different in her look, but she is sexy." And to now being like, "Whoa, she's a serious, hard-hitting, dramatic contender." And I say good for her. I think she definitely deserves the nomination. Creating a score to a film based off of 4 words and not seeing the film, and really creating a score that I can sit there at the end as the credits roll and really say to myself, the music was perfect. It was perfect. For you to accomplish that without seeing the movie, I 100% believe that Jerskin Fendrix deserves the nomination for Best Original Score. And I do agree that Will Tracy does deserve the nomination for Best Adapted Screenplay, because this was a lot of, there was so much known and unknown at the same time, and there was such a wonderful writing with the power dynamics between Terry and Michelle, and I believe that deserves the nomination. This movie, I feel like, is a return to my favorite genre, if you can call it that, are indie films. I guess not a genre, because you could be indie horror, indie comedy, drama, but I started my love of film with a lot of independent films like Gigantic and The Cake Eaters and Sling Blade. A lot of independent films really made me fall in love with cinema. And this film is just so different, and it's not so broad. It's not really for the masses, but I feel like they did a really good job of having a wide release that was so weird, that was so different, and having it resonate with a lot of people. So that's those are my thoughts on Begonia. I would love to know what you guys think. If you're not watching this live and you comment afterwards, I will be in the comments, and I would love to type back and just give a little chat and let's talk about the film. So thank you guys so much for watching What's Good Kimberly and joining my Oscar Real Talk Oscar discussions. I'm going to go live every weekend till we reach the Oscars. And my next one is going to be If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Take care.